Last night for Subverse, we talked about Mark Zuckerberg ignoring a subpoena and the Canadian politicians who were extremely angry. And in a show of good faith, I was holding back my anger. There was so much I wanted to say. So really quickly, we are now getting the Subverse site up and running. We have the long form article, or long-ish article, I don't want to say long form, talking about Zuckerberg ignoring the subpoena and what's going on. And we'll come to this in a second. But right now, the news is there was a committee happening in Canada, which involved people from other countries. Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg were subpoenaed to appear, and they didn't. And at the hearing, there were two empty chairs. Now, the head of public policy, I believe, for Canada ended up showing up. And the complete and utter disdain for, for politicians, for the government, for the rule of law infuriates me. But apparently now, they could possibly vote on a contempt of court. That's one of their options. And we have this story from The Hill. But there's more. A former Facebook investor is saying that Canada, I believe Canada, should shut Facebook down if they refuse to be held accountable. Mark Zuckerberg doesn't care what his platform is doing in other countries. And I think I really, really do not like Facebook and do not like Zuckerberg. I think he is flaunting the law and he's having a serious detrimental impact. And I think he's just an outright bad and creepy guy. That's just my opinion. I think Facebook's trash. So we'll start with this, right? He could be held in contempt. Literally, he actually is facing potential jail time. Now, that means, what has to happen first? He has to go to Canada. Then if he refuses the summons, they could, put him in jail. They would have to hold a vote on it. But he did ignore the subpoena. My understanding is that he's done it before. So here's what we're going to do. Before we get started, go to timcast.com/donate if you'd like to support my work. There's a monthly donation option, a cryptocurrency option, a physical address. Liking, commenting, and sharing the video do the best to help, because that's how YouTube figures things out, I guess. So here's the story. We'll start with The Hill. Zuckerberg could be held in contempt of Canadian Parliament. Did I say contempt of Canadian Parliament? If he continues to ignore requests from Canadian lawmakers to testify before their government, Canadian Conservative Member of Parliament Bob Zimmer said Tuesday. Canadian lawmakers voted Tuesday to issue an open-ended summons for Zuckerberg and their chief financial officer, Sheryl Sandberg, meaning the two will face summons to appear before the parliament the next time they step foot in Canada. If the executives fail to abide by those summons, Canadian lawmakers would vote on a motion to hold them in contempt of parliament. So, they say, if approved, that motion could result in jail time for the powerful executives, though it is unlikely it would play out that way. So I definitely don't want to, here's the challenge. I don't want to over-sensationalize and make it seem like they're actually going to come and arrest Zuckerberg. At the same time, I don't want to bury the lead. We covered this story yesterday on Subverse, and we did I believe we did a pretty good job of trying to be rather, the goal of Subverse isn't to sensationalize or do anything like this. So it was, for me, I'm reading the story that we put out, and I'm reading it, and it's very dry, and it's straight news, and I'm really, really angry the whole time, because it's not just about the fact that Mark Zuckerberg ignored the subpoena, but it's that he doesn't seem to care that Facebook is damaging to all of these, but he doesn't care. He doesn't care. He doesn't care that foreign countries are saying, dude, you are causing serious problems, and you need to come and talk to us, and he just doesn't show up. One of the more interesting things about it, though, is in the story we covered this guy. I believe his last name is McNamee. What's his first name? I want to make sure I find the quote properly. So let's yes, McNamee. Venture capitalist Roger McNamee told the committee, if your goals are to protect democracy and personal liberty, you have to be bold. You have to force a radical transformation of the business model of internet platforms. At the end of the day, though, the most effective path to reform would be to shut down the platforms, at least temporarily. Any country can go first. The platforms have left you no choice. The time has come to call their bluff. Whoa! I agree. I really, really agree. It's a challenge. It is a challenge because everyone's got competing interests in what Facebook is and what it is doing. And I think one of the challenges is that in foreign countries like Canada, they want to regulate speech. I don't agree with that. In the U.S., they are regulating speech and can't or shouldn't be because of the First Amendment. So what Facebook becomes is going to be different for each country, and that's probably the way it should be. If you live in Canada and they make certain speech illegal, well, that's your country, and you got to figure things out. I think free speech is a fundamental right. You have a right to speak, right? You know, I pointed this out in my video about the world. It's called The World is Cruel and Unfair. You want to talk about what rights are? If you're in the middle of the woods with a broken leg drinking from a stream, you have a right to speech, you have freedom of movement, you have freedom of expression. You can do your thing unimpeded. But you don't have health care, you don't get welfare, it's on you. So we can talk about what rights are. The point is, some countries don't enact it that way. Well, you know what? That's their country, and what can we really do about it? I think it's going to be up to people in Canada to fight for that right, but it seems like it's a losing battle. Long story short, if we say that Facebook should be shut down by these countries to enact and enforce their laws, then Facebook will basically have no choice but to either abide by the rule of law beneath the government, not above it, or be shut down. And so, you know, the way I see Facebook with their usership is on the decline, at least as it pertains to young people, I'm over it. You know, delete Facebook was trending. And the reason it was trending on Twitter is because Democrats were mad. There was a video about Nancy Pelosi that made her look bad. And you know what I'm thinking? I'm like, you know what? Absolutely no. You should be allowed to post these videos. But whatever the reason that people are saying delete Facebook, I'm like, all right, do it. Facebook needs to go. Twitter needs to go. The thing about these social media sites is that they're completely unaccountable. They view themselves above the law, above our culture, above social norms, and they flaunt it. The reason why I get really, really angry about all this is because I literally sat in front of Jack Dorsey and Vijaya Gadde, and we talked about these issues, and they say all these things, they're fancy words and lies, they acknowledge some of the issues, and they act like it's their role to be the arbiters, the heralds of true superior morals. You know, Jack Dorsey says, we want to promote a healthy conversation. What does that mean? It doesn't mean anything. Mark Zuckerberg, he bans certain people, he doesn't ban other people. It's all just PR. And then when you have an actual country like Canada saying, we need to talk about what's going on because Facebook is causing a lot of problems and they're not being held accountable, guess what? Zuckerberg, don't show up. So I find it absolutely fascinating. McNamee, this investor, actually pointed to Sri Lanka, the censorship. So here's the thing. In the challenge of whether or not we should shut Facebook down, it's an issue of private business rights, in which case I do kind of lean in terms of speech, communication, and private businesses. They shouldn't really be shut down. But there's a point to be made that something needs to be done to force Facebook to be held accountable because they cannot, look, let me put it this way. What happened in Sri Lanka, censorship, no good. But Facebook should not be allowed to continue without account. They're a massive multi-billion-dollar corporation with international interests, flaunting the rule of law in whatever country they operate, and they shouldn't be allowed to do it. Something needs to happen. So I think Roger McNamee has an interesting point. Be bold. Shut them down temporarily, and that'll wake them up. That's going to slice their revenue right down the middle. And maybe something like that needs to happen. Otherwise, and this is actually kind of hilarious, they could face jail time over refusing. So it'll be really interesting because think about this. Right now, I'd be willing to bet Zuckerberg and Sandberg will not be going to Canada anytime soon. Think about that. They've got interests in Canada. They've got offices. They've got employees. There's reasons they need to go there. Well, now if they do, they're going to have to go in front of Parliament and testify. And if they don't, they could face jail time. It probably will not happen that way. But seriously, listen, let me say it like this. Do I really think Zuckerberg's going to get arrested? No, I absolutely don't. But Canadian Parliament is putting that on the table to hold him in contempt. And if he faces jail time for this, they are saying it straight up. I think it's a lottery. It's a lottery winnings chance that anything that's going to happen. One in several hundred million or something. But damn. This shows they're serious. Unfortunately, most of us know it'll never happen. Zuckerberg's way too powerful. He's got way too money. Canada is a country of 36 million people. Should he be held accountable? Should Facebook be accountable? 100%. Is Zuckerberg worried? No, I'm pretty sure Zuckerberg's Facebook's GDP rivals that of Canada. Maybe not. I mean, maybe that's a bit, facetious. Well, let's read this from the Hill. It's only fitting that there's an ongoing summons, so as soon as they step foot in our country, they will be served and expected to sit in front of our committee, said Zimmer, who's the chair of the Canadian House of Commons Committee on Access to Information, Privacy, and Ethics. He made the announcement after Zuckerberg and Sandberg flouted a subpoena to appear before the committee during a hearing attended by international lawmakers about privacy, misinformation, and hate speech. See, that's why I'm kind of like, you can't really control these things. But you know what? That's Canada. Okay, and I think most of you agree, if Canada's going to do it, okay. In the U.S., we operate under different rules. Unfortunately, Facebook doesn't operate under our social norms in America either. So it's just one of the reasons I think Facebook is just awful, just completely awful. So here's what ends up happening, right? You get the gist of it. I think this is really fascinating stuff. Over on our Subverse YouTube channel, we published this video, and Zuckerberg ignores subpoena. Politicians are outraged. We didn't want to make anything that was overly sensational, like Zuckerberg faces jail time, which is what I'm doing on this video. And that's because I want to make sure there's a distinction between my personal opinion and my outrage versus what the story actually is. So the video did really, really well. But I tell you, I kid you not, when I was reading, the way we do this is it's a script is produced, whereas with these videos, I just don't read a script. So as I'm reading this, I'm just getting angrier and angrier. Seriously, check out the video on Subverse. And I don't know if you can tell I'm really angry. I'm trying not to be, because I want to make sure that when you watch these videos, when you get our news over at Subverse, it's not going to be, pushing my opinion. You want my opinion, you come here, I'll give you my opinion. And I often don't really comment on stories we've already done on Subverse. But I gotta tell you, man, read this story, Subverse. I'll put the link in the description. It's really in depth, covers a wide range of the issues surrounding what happened with the regulation Facebook is facing. But man, is it infuriating to hear about how Zuckerberg is just this conceited, narcissistic, awful person who is unaccountable, who gets away with these things. Okay, he should not be above the law. He should, we are a world of various countries, of different cultures and different rules. And if he wants to make money off the backs of the Canadian citizens, then he's got to be held accountable to their government. But no, Zuckerberg runs his business and then doesn't show up when he's asked. And what really frustrated me, what really made me angry. So I'm reading the script, right? And we get to a point where we read one of the quotes from Facebook's spokesperson or whatever. And then later on, following more commentary, they give basically the exact same statement. So they say, oh, we're absolutely, going to work with the committee on whatever they need. And then when they don't show up, they're asked again, they go, yes, we're absolutely, it's identical. So check it out. The quotes are identical. And it was that statement that Facebook, the way I see it, Canada's hey, we got problems. We need you to come here and talk to us. Zuckerberg says no. And then Facebook issues a statement. So now they're saying we're going to issue a summons. You could face potential contempt and jail time. And they issue the exact same statement. You know what that says to me? That's like a low tier smack in the face, giving them the same statement. They're really saying, we don't care about you. We won't show up. And here's the same piece of paper we handed you last time because we can't even be bothered to write a new paragraph. I really, elitism is one of the things that bothers me more than anything else in the world. And it's why I have such disdain for many of these Democrats, these people who are super wealthy somehow. They're in Congress and their salary is $170,000 a year, but they're worth $200 million. How does that happen? I have no idea. Not all of them. A lot of them are broke. But there is just some lifelong politicians that somehow manage to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Got to wonder how that happens. The elitism, the double standard. And Mark Zuckerberg is a perfect example of that. He refuses to acknowledge the problems. They flaunt their power. They ignore the rule of law. They ignore the people demanding that they follow the rules. They ignore it. He's flaunting his wealth. And you know what? Zuckerberg, if it takes the form of temporarily shutting down Facebook, maybe that's what needs to happen. Now, Facebook, I think, is awful. But at the same time, as much as it's fun to talk about shutting down Facebook, the more worrisome thing is private business rights, like I mentioned, but also individual rights. This is a tool used by people. Imagine if the government shut down AT&T because AT&T wouldn't show up. Your phone stopped working. Yeah, that's not okay. And, I understand it's different in that you pay a phone subscription. Facebook is free for the end user, and they sell ads. Shutting down Facebook would disrupt their ad market very, very seriously and hurt them. Shutting down a phone company wouldn't, because they already got your money. They'd have to prorate you for the missed days or something like that. But there's got to be a solution. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges. How do you make Facebook play ball? How do you make Facebook play by the rules? You can threaten them with jail time. I really don't think Zuckerberg cares. Dude's a billionaire. You think he gives a crap about showing up in Canada again? It's never going to happen. So you can wave it in his face. But think about these politicians. Yes, they have power as politicians to an extent, but they have nowhere near the power that Zuckerberg has. You have to understand how dangerous Facebook is moving forward and why this is so serious, okay? Facebook can choose not to allow a political message to appear on their platform. The only thing holding them back from world domination is Google, and that's not a good thing because Google does the same thing, and their interests are aligned in a lot of ways. Let's say one of these politicians, what do you think is going to happen when they go for re-election? Facebook's going to be like, hate speech, like they've done to other people. And now you get a politician who steps up and says, I want to run for office. I don't want to even play around with quotes like that. But someone will say that they want to run for office to stop Facebook manipulating elections, spreading misinformation, and whatever else is breaking the law. So Mark Zuckerberg sits back, puts his feet up, says, send him that same paragraph we sent him last time, and then delete his profile. It's a private platform. We can do what we want. Regulation needs to happen. Okay, it needs to happen. Will Chamberlain of Human Events wrote a really great article explaining that in the U.S., regulation can only ratchet in one direction. So there's a lot of conservatives who don't seem to understand. If regulation hits these platforms, it can only serve to protect speech. Only. The First Amendment. It has already been ruled by the Supreme Court that these platforms are important for public discourse. It's about time something happened to stop them from flaunting the law, breaking the rules. And look, if they have the ability to suspend anyone they want for any reason, then you will not, then no one could ever challenge them. It's authoritarian insanity. It's techno-fascism. Listen, let's talk about maybe fascism is a bad way to explain it, but I think about what we see in World War II, this idea of ever-expansive power, manipulating people, controlling people. Facebook has it. They're international. They can restrict speech on whatever level they want. They're a private business, they say. Well, guess what? There will come a time when one of these, left-wing individuals wants to challenge the system, the surveillance, and Facebook will go, extremist, delete. Think about it. I believe it was FBI documents and Homeland Security. This was published by The Independent. We also know that Homeland Security in New Jersey, they listed Antifa as political, extremists. They're listed under terror. So if Facebook really wants to, they can easily associate anyone who aligns with the far left and say, oh, but they were engaged in these activities. And what do you say? How do you prove them wrong? Think about, I'm going to throw this to the Krasensteins, right? If you're not familiar with who they are, the Krasensteins are the anti-Trump brothers recently suspended from Twitter. What did Twitter say? They were buying fake engagements, operating multiple accounts or something like that. And in fact, Twitter didn't actually say they did. Someone said, why were they suspended? And they said, the rules apply to everybody, operating fake accounts, never directly accusing them. And that's how they do it. You have no proof that these people did anything wrong. You don't have to like the Krasensteins, but they're the perfect example of Twitter doesn't prove why they were banned. Facebook doesn't prove why they were banned. So what do you think is going to happen? You will have a politician, you have an activist, you will have someone rising up and saying, enough, these people are insane and need to be stopped. And they'll say, oh, they were secretly sending violent messages. We had to delete them. And then people just go, oh, wow. Facebook is seriously, it's a nightmare. You don't understand that Facebook and Google control most of search. Most of the content you see comes through these platforms, and they can choose to remove a news website that challenges them. We are in the nightmare dystopia. So you know what? Maybe Zuckerberg does need some jail time. It'll never happen though, because when was the last time you saw someone of power held to account? It never happens. It doesn't. You can name up. You can probably count. You probably can't count on your fingers and toes the amount of politicians who probably should have been locked up and weren't. And with someone like this, who flaunts the rule of law, able to control speech on a grand scale, man, welcome to the nightmare. And it's a joke almost, because people say, oh, Tim Pool's next. Tim Pool's channels are going to get deleted on YouTube. Yep, bring it on, man. Bring it on. I'm going to keep talking about this. I don't care if Google wants to shut me down because I'm calling them out for the massive power and demanding some kind of regulation and control of these companies that are out of control. So be it. So be it. I will stand in front of the firing line and say these big tech companies are out of control. And this is another example. Now, I do believe Google is nowhere near as bad as Facebook, but certainly Google has its problems, cultural problems within the company, and they're just too massive and have too much power. You can, admittedly, YouTube has done more to protect speech than Facebook certainly has. Think about the people who have been banned recently, and Google's refused to ban them. Think about Sargon getting banned from all these platforms. YouTube's refused to ban him. So I can respect that. It doesn't change the fact they have too much power, and there needs to be some kind of restriction and control on these people under the First Amendment, which means they cannot restrict speech. We got to figure it out. We do. But you know what? I'll leave it there. Stick around. More segments to come. Next, we'll be starting shortly for those on the podcast. If you want to support my work on the podcast, just leave a good review. It's appreciated. Everyone else, I will see you at 1 p.m. on this channel, and I will see you soon.